Hello, you're tuned to Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond, contemporary conversations where stories, science, traditions and new ideas meet. Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond. It's about family, connected parenting, celebrating your amazing body, connection with your community and finding your truth. Our show is coming to you from the studios of BayFM in Byron Bay and is broadcasting across Australia on the Community Radio Network and globally via our podcast at pbbmedia.org.
This episode is sponsored by Mugu Skincare.
Coming to you from the studios here in Byron Bay and broadcasting across Australia on the Community Radio Network. That's our show, Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond. You can also find us online at pbbmedia.org and through Apple Podcasts and all the other cool podcast providers as well. I'm Annalia Tia, and today with me in the studio is Farah Cleret. She is a mother of two and a functional nutritionist, which is one of the coolest professions I know of. I love functional medicine, functional nutrition. If you haven't heard about it, check it out online. And Farah is originally from the UK. She's been living in Australia for about 3 years, and about a year and a half ago, she was diagnosed with cancer, and she'll tell us all about that, and went into post-treatment medically induced menopause. So, Farah, tell us a little bit about this diagnosis and what happened. Hello.
Yeah. Hi.
First of all, hello, of course. Welcome to the studio.
Hi. Thank you very much. So like you say, I've been in Australia for 3 years. And so about a year and a half into being in Australia, which was April 2018, I just went for a routine removal of the coil. And so I went to the doctor and I had the coil removed, and she saw a bit of blood and she said, that's not normal. And that started the journey really towards getting diagnosed with cervical cancer. And so this was a couple of weeks after my 45th birthday. So, obviously that was a little bit of a shock, and I consider myself quite a healthy person. I wasn't expecting this at all. And so, that was quite a lot to take in. But when this unfolded, what I realised was, initially what they told me was the treatment was going to be radical hysterectomy. And this terrified me even more. So I almost forgot about the cancer diagnosis and thought, well, now my life is ending, because actually what I'm facing is the menopause. And the terror of the menopause overtook the terror of the cancer, and the fear that the cancer was going to end my life, because I knew really that the menopause would. I've known of it as the end of femininity, the end of your life. You get fat, you get depressed, it's all downhill from there, what have you got to look forward to, sort of thing. And this really sort of overtook, engulfed me really. So after a little while I went back to the doctor to confirm the diagnosis, and she said, well, look, there is a little bit of a spread. It's not what we thought. It was a bit worse than what we thought, so there's a bit of local spread. So the hysterectomy is not a good form of treatment, because you would have to have radiotherapy anyway. So the form of treatment we're going to offer you is chemo and radiotherapy. And my reaction to that was like, oh, phew, good. Crazy now I look back on it, but that was my reaction. It was like, I don't have to do that whole hysterectomy. Maybe I won't go into that sort of overnight menopause. And so for a while there I felt a bit more positive about it. And the prognosis for cervical cancer is actually pretty good. 70% of women recover fully. And so I felt much more positive until I realised that the radiotherapy was actually going to be pelvic radiotherapy, and that would sort of slowly nuke my ovaries. So instead of overnight menopause, I would go into menopause, but it would be a little bit slower, a matter of weeks rather than hours. Much as I searched online for incidences where people had this and not gone into menopause, I couldn't find them. So I had to kind of face that inevitability that menopause was going to happen.
What a powerful, strong, intense situation to face, and at a time in your life where you may not have been prepared for that, and thinking it's maybe 10 years away. And is that what you were thinking?
I hadn't really thought about it too much. I hadn't had any symptoms of the cancer or really of menopause. like any woman, I've experienced hormonal fluctuations, and I've experienced sometimes where that can lead you, which is not always pleasant. It's not always a pleasant experience. But some friends have been going through it, and of course I know women that have gone through it, and I've treated women that have gone through it. But for myself, it wasn't on my radar yet, and I still felt young. I still felt like I had more to give, which is, again, this is a reason that I felt the menopause was going to be the end of that.
So what was your reaction going in to this treatment, which, knowing in advance that you'd have a few more weeks of premenopausal existence and then pretty quickly going into this medically induced menopause?
So I had to learn how to put that a little bit to the back, because it took a little while to get to my treatment. It takes a few weeks, and I decided to go back to the UK to have my treatment, to be around my friends and family. So there was a couple of months there where I had to really process that and say, okay, this isn't really the biggest thing. We've got to concentrate and get rid of the cancer, and then I'll worry about the menopause. And so I went through the chemo and the radio, and then another thing called the brachytherapy, which is a huge dose of radiotherapy directly to the tumour. And it was it's not nice treatment. It was difficult treatment, and I was very sick, and the radiotherapy felt like it was burning, and I tried to do a lot around it to mitigate all of those experiences, but it's very difficult when you're feeling very sick to really look after yourself. But anyway, I guess that's a story for another time. I mean, the good thing is I got through that treatment, and the cancer is all clear, so it worked. Then I sort of sat there, and whilst I was trying to gather myself and find my feet again, and obviously feeling a bit rough from the effect of the chemo and the radio, I was then trying to discern what my menopausal symptoms were going to be, and what I had to look forward to, which I felt at the time was not a lot. And so I sort of sat and I waited, and I let myself recover, and I was quite kind to myself. I came back to Australia, got a bit of sunshine, which helped. And then I started to sort of notice a shift, a mental shift. And that shift was more clarity, and suddenly feeling much more positive, and actually feeling quite empowered. And I suddenly realised that this was a hormonal shift. It had nothing really to do with the fact that I just survived cancer, but possibly that was in the mix. But it really felt on a visceral level that I identified that as a hormonal shift. And at that point, I was reminded of many, many years ago, 20 years before that, I had read a book whilst I was studying nutrition by a doctor called Christiane Northrup, which is called The Wisdom of Menopause. Great book.
A great book.
Great book. And in it, she had described how menopause is like the hormonal veil lifting. And all of these things that had kept you in what's regarded by society as the traditional female role, which is the nurturing, which is the looking after others, which is putting yourself last, and just the very sort of traditional feminine roles. That veil lifts, and suddenly you see the world in a different way. Your perspective kind of shifts, and you become empowered in yourself, and you put yourself first, and you become more centre stage in your own life. And she described it as a very powerful experience, a very empowering experience. And I suddenly started to realise that this was the case. And so I looked more online and tried to find positive experiences, and it's very difficult.
Yeah, this is such a fascinating conversation. I'm Anna Leatia. This is the Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond show. Chatting with Farah Cleret today. She is a mother of two, a functional nutritionist, and was diagnosed not long ago with cervical cancer, had some quite aggressive treatment, brought on medically induced menopause. And Farah's discussing the very surprising positive outcomes. Can you share a little bit more about those positive aspects, Farah?
Yeah, so I suppose I have to say a bit more about the kind of expectations as well. And when I sort of realised that I was feeling much more positive, and I went back online and I just looked at how menopause is kind of packaged and sold to us. And one of the first websites I came across was 34 symptoms of menopause. And so I looked at it, and there's not one positive, obviously. I've never in my life sort of looked at a website and thought, wow, there's a positive spin on menopause. And that was just more and more and more of the same. Everybody saying, using words like loss and debilitating. And it really felt sort of crushing. It felt like it was the end of the world. So, yeah, I mean, you can package anything like that, can't you? If you package marriage or work or even going out on a Saturday night by just listing the negative aspects, nobody would do anything. Because all of those things, you get a much more rounded view. You get the positive aspects as well, where you can see how you can incorporate the negative into the positive, and it becomes a rounded experience that isn't to fear. But, I knew from my own experience that menopause was something that I really, really feared, almost more than cancer. And so I knew that there was something that society was telling me that was wrong. So, some of the positive aspects I have found since then, I've dug a bit deeper and gone back to Christiane Northrup as well, and heard from other people where the positive aspects of empowerment and a shifting perspective, and not to mention obviously freedom from your monthlies, from bleeding every month, from whatever that entails. Suddenly you have this kind of much more level playing field, where you aren't thinking, every 3 weeks or 4 weeks I'm going to have to take a little bit of time off because of that. You have this kind of calming of the field, and you become much more self-centered, which sounds bad and a lot of women might recoil from, because we're taught to feel guilty if we put ourselves first, if we are the center of our own stage and we decide to look after ourselves before others. But we've done that bit. That was the middle bit. There's three portions of your life if you look at it that way. So we're going to spend the next third of our life in a menopausal state. So let's look for the good stuff. Let's reframe this. Let's find where the positives are, and there are a lot. And that's not to say, change brings grief. Any kind of change brings grief. If you move to a much more beautiful house down the road or in another city, that brings the grief too. You're in this beautiful house, it's where you want to be, but you might miss your old neighbourhood, you might miss the local coffee shop and miss your route to work. But you look forward because you have this beautiful new house. And so it's about looking forward. But in the menopause, we are only encouraged to look back at what we've lost. Yeah. But if we look forward to this beautiful new house, and that's not to say this beautiful new house is not going to need maintenance. In the menopause, we do have to look out specifically for bone health, for cardiovascular health, for gut health, for emotional health, and we have to face that. We have to know that that's a normal part of aging, and we can cruise that if we can focus on that. Shift this focus from this kind of frenetic caring for others thing into caring for ourselves.
And we like to often talk about on the show about the benefits of taking care of yourself also during the middle bit, and how deeply that impacts the menopausal bit. So if you're arriving quite depleted to menopause, it's much harder to get back on track than it is if you're arriving relatively in a slightly better shape in this not so dilapidated house.
And that's where the education comes in, at that menopause is a positive state that you are heading towards anyway. So let's prepare. And then I think that any kind of resistance is going to feel much worse than an acceptance. So if you're resisting, like I was, going into this menopausal state, you're more likely to have fear. Your body's more likely to clam up. Resistance can make your body, make your whole body inflamed, because your body listens to your mind. Your body hears everything that goes on in your mind and your emotions. And that's not to say it's in your mind, it's that your mind actually affects your body. So if we have the positive view of it beforehand, then going into menopause would seem a lot easier for people. And there's the beginning stage of menopause, which is called the perimenopause, which is about 2 to 8 years, and that reflects puberty. So it's a bit all over the place, and I missed that. Obviously, that's the bit I missed. So the perimenopause is a bit all over the place, and it's a bit of your hormones kind of resettling down. But whereas puberty is seen as positive, perimenopause is seen as the start of the journey towards the end. Really, that's it. The positivity, liberation, change in complete mindset, that I think is the positive part of menopause.
This episode is sponsored by Mugu Skincare. Developed by the founders for their own children, Mugu is made for issues such as cradle cap, nappy rash and eczema. Their sunscreens and washes are gentle for babies and children, using only the sort of ingredients you would use if you had the time to make them. Mugu is stocked in most pharmacies and health shops around Australia, and they ship overseas. Check out their wide range of affordable products that even include deodorant, dental care and vegan makeup at mugu.com.au. Always read the label, use as directed.
So for you, I mean, it sounds like one of the most beautiful bits about it was that more internal focus on yourself, and also the relinquishing of some of those, what it's sounding like to me is all of this, like the up and down of taking care of always outside of yourself and outside of yourself as a mother and as a woman during those reproductive years with all the hormonal changes. And not that they're, in any way negative. They have their own beauty and their own purpose and absolutely to be revered as mothers and all of that. But moving into this more, the next phase of your life, the joys of that is to be free of those ups and downs and in a different way. Yeah. So you're still a mother, you're still caring for others, but there's a much more stable, kind of simplified,
that's what I feel, and
smooth going, which it sounds so interesting and so something to look forward to in such a great way.
So you move through those other stages, and it's not to say you're necessarily overjoyed to see the back of them. It's just that's life. You do, and you can mark those changes as you will, and that would be nice if we did have more to mark those changes,
like celebrations or different ceremonies. Or it is a rite of passage, absolutely.
Or just any kind of cohesion with thinking that will help you to understand those changes rather than fear them.
And do you feel your capacity to see things in a more clear way? You were saying that's happened now, and has that changed your worldview a little bit around what's going on for women and also as a mother specifically?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the world's a crazy place, so I think it's difficult to separate that from, but I feel much more clear in my thinking. I feel maybe less anxious, actually, because I think that I feel like I've got something more to offer. I feel like my life's not over. We've all got something to offer. We all have to now engage. And I feel like women at this age, or 50 plus, the menopausal women, I should say, are worthwhile and useful, and we can do stuff as well. We're not just going to be sort of sent to the trash can and that's the end of that. Of
course not. Oh my God, we need all of that accumulated treasure of amazingness that's available to us through all of that experience. So much of what you've learned throughout your lifetime as a woman, as a mother, is so needed in the community. And if we kind of discard that bit, saying, oh, scary bit, we don't want to look at it and don't want to hear from women in that space and stage, I think we lose so much as a community and lose so much as a society.
Yeah.
On the show with me today is Farah Cleret, a mother of two, functional nutritionist, and who's gone into medically induced menopause, which really is just menopause now. And Farah is telling us about her experience of receiving cancer treatment and then consequently going into menopause and the impact that's had on her life and how she sees the world as well. Farah, tell us a bit about, we know so many women have negative experiences of menopause. That is definitely part of the story as well. But we rarely hear about the positive aspects. And we know I've heard from loads of women who've had just a really simple move into menopause, just really easeful and nothing major. And of course, I've heard from lots of women who've had the opposite experience and everything in between. So what do we know about menopause in terms of how it unfolds?
So I think obviously you're right, and we can't ignore that there are lots of women that don't have a good experience of menopause. And so you could sort of say, oh, what are you talking about? Menopause is not all positive. I know so-and-so, and she really suffered. And of course, that is completely valid. And I would say to those things, there's a few things, but one of them is that when something is sold to us like this, So we have the opposite of what's the placebo effect. So placebo effect is when you have a positive effect basically due to psychological belief. You're given what you think is medication to relieve your symptoms, and your symptoms are relieved, and then you find out that actually it was just a sugar pill. So that's the placebo, which is a positive effect, which doesn't mean, like I said before, I think, that it's all in your mind. It means that your mind and the state of your mind informs your body and affects your body. So the opposite of the placebo is called the nocebo, which is another thing that is being studied in the medical world now, which is basically when you expect negative outcomes, when you're told that this will only have a negative outcome, your psychological and your psychosomatic system tell you that this is going to be negative, and it's much more likely to be negative. Again, not all in your mind. Your mind is informing your body, and your body is following. Your body's listening to those negative thoughts and going into inflammation and illness mode, disease, dis-ease.
I mean, what's coming to mind is the realization, and again, is that how women in all major changes throughout their lifetime have this negative outlook on the potentials of this experience, getting your period and what ensues with that, how bad that can be, and giving birth and how bad that can be, and then going to menopause and how bad that can be, and aging and being frail, and going into a home and blah blah blah. So for women to consistently have negative messages thrown at them through the media, through movies, through horror stories from friends, not hearing the positives, but mostly only hearing the negatives, which is often what we do. We tell stories of negative. What impact must that have on women, and on their families and children and beyond the society that we live in? Just a little thought there. It's just not just for menopause. It seems to be accurate for all stages of life.
Sure, but I think the difference between menopause and other stages of life is this forward-looking. There is something to get over in terms of puberty and childbirth, and then you will continue your life. But in menopause, what you're told is that your life really won't continue, and you kind of everything good is behind you. And so you don't have hope at the end of the story. You have just suffering and then death, which is a horrible way to put it. But it's also, I don't want to diminish people who have horrible symptoms. Symptoms are telling you that, showing you where things are not going right, and showing you where you need to do your housekeeping, and how we need to address this. And I guess, if you're looking at it from an evolutionary perspective, it's the right time for that hormonal veil to lift, so that you can see where you need to work for your body to then continue to take you into old age. If we believe everything is negative, then we live that experience. That's the experience that we will have. But if we can believe that there is hope beyond these symptoms, and that these symptoms are just there to carry us forward and to help us to see what we need to address, then we will, we'll do the necessaries, and we'll do it gladly, because that's, there's an end in sight that's very, very positive for us.
Absolutely. And so in terms of choosing your treatment, I'm really curious, and I'm sure a lot of listeners there too, you come from a more integrative medicine background, you're a functional nutritionist, maybe even give us a tiny insight into what functional nutrition is.
Yeah.
And then also, why did you choose a more medical pathway, or is that what you chose? I know from speaking to you a little bit before is that you supported yourself as well with these other not necessarily medical aspects, but the main treatment was a medicine, allopathic medicine.
Yeah. So, I think I thought about it a lot before I was diagnosed with cancer. What would I do if I was? How would I react? And my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she was a nutritionist as well, and she was of a very alternative mindset, but she was also really scared of doctors. She had white coat syndrome. She didn't want to go there, and she was very much in denial, I think. And she had a lumpectomy and she had a mastectomy, and then she refused any other treatment. And she was okay for a bit. She seemed okay, but she wouldn't even go for checkups. She wouldn't even go, and she did herbs, and we took her to a clinic in Switzerland, and she did all sorts of things, but ultimately she died. And I suppose I was sort of quite angry with her for not even doing the tests. And when my results came back, it was stage 2B, which meant that there was spread locally, but it wasn't in the lymph. And I felt that I didn't have the time to mess around. The outcome in this particular cancer is very good. You know, had they said to me, oh, you do chemotherapy, it's 25% successful, I might have really thought much harder. But as it was, the outcome was very successful with the chemo and radio. I didn't have anywhere to live at the time. We'd moved something like 12 times in that year, and we were due to move again sort of halfway through my treatment. And it was too much to think about juicing and doing that kind of thing when I was just, you know, I didn't have all those other needs met, you know, that kind of hierarchy of needs. I didn't have home, stability, security. But even if I had, I think I probably would have gone the same way. I decided that even though the treatment seemed really counterintuitive, I mean, it was really very mechanical and weird, and, you know, hopping on and off a machine every day and then being infused with this cold liquid once a week, it was really horrible. You know, you can't dress that up, but it worked. And, you know, ultimately I'm glad I chose that way. And yeah, I guess I'm kind of playing catch up and I haven't suffered very many side effects, to be honest. And still, every 3 months I go back to the doctor and it's all clear. So
it's wonderful, and congratulations as well.
Thank you.
It's such a powerful decision to make, and so great to be able to follow your intuition, your knowing about your body, and to have insight into your story and understanding and compassion and all of that, no matter what background you come from and what choice you make. And I have several really good friends that have gone through similar situations with different cancers, and yeah, just so happy and proud of them for following their knowing and their intuition and just getting what needed to get done, basically. What do you take away from all of this?
The message really that I want to just get over here is don't fear the change. The change is coming, and there might be work to be done, but it's all good work and it's all towards a positive outcome. And that you know, you don't have to be a feminist to look back and see that all of women's bodies and what happens has been pathologized by a patriarchal system, you know, from the minute that we hit menstruation, through childbirth in hospital, through all these kind of things that just make us fear ourselves and our body, make us diminish in our power, and put us in the care of someone else. Yeah, so I think don't fear the change. Like, learn about it, understand that there is work to be done, as in any aging situation, and that specifically is looking after your bones, looking after your heart, looking after your mental health, and your gut health, which ties all of those things together, and also just having an attitude that empowers you, even though there are some things that might feel bad on certain days. In any, you know, we've been through this our whole lives, of hormones up and down, so there are days when you won't feel great about it, but those days are numbered and you keep going and you get through that.
Yeah, so intensely entrenched, and this is why so deeply and desperately we need to be changing the stories we tell, and the beautiful, powerful, positive aspects of even things that can be quite difficult, like a cancer diagnosis and strong, intense treatment, and medically induced menopause. They're not all to be seen in a negative light. In fact, quite to the contrary, based on your beautiful story. And I'm so thankful to you, Farah, for telling it today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you want to find out more about Farah's work, you can go to
farahcleret.com. FarahCleret.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond. Tune in next week for more information and inspiration, bringing us full circle. You can find our show on iTunes, Spreaker, the usual social media under Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond, and our website at pbbmedia.org.